So let's react this video, how Seed does creative testing on meta ads and why it works. And let's see if it works for coaching business, for info product sellers, for consultant business, and so on. This is a big brand company, so let's see what they're doing specifically and how it fits to your business, okay? Let's check this one out.
My name is Dara Denney, and welcome to our new series, Ad Spend. This series isn't about getting you to spend more money on your advertising. What we're actually going to be doing is going behind the scenes with real brands who are using meta ads to scale, breaking down their creative, their growth strategies, and everything that's working today in paid social. Today, we're speaking with the probiotics brand Seed Health about the unique way they approach creative testing. We're going to talk to their growth manager and their
Really cool the way that she started the video on the street. Really interesting approach to diverse the video format.
creative strategists all about this unique methodology that they have and really break down how they are structuring their tests inside of Ads Manager. I am so pumped to have this conversation, so let's get started.
Now, I really love Seed's creative strategy because they are not afraid to say the bold thing in their ads.
The brand was founded in 2016 with a mission to bring more science to the wellness space, which was often filled with misinformation and vague claims.
Using meta ads as their main marketing channel, Seed began to scale super rapidly, spending 7 figures a month on the platform alone. However, that scale and success brought them a challenging problem. They were spending a huge portion of their budget.
Okay, obviously remember all their videos are showing their product. Like they even hire actors here, like people to show the product. But for the coaching business, obviously you got to generate value. You're not going to sell it straight away. You're probably going to send them to a webinar, to a VSL, book a call or something, and then you're going to warm them up via email. But anyways, you'll see that they're more focused on the product, whereas you should be focusing on your all products should focus on a transformation. But when it comes to coaching business, talking to camera videos, as this one, that they have those, obviously they're even more important for coaching business. So let's see.
And resources on creative testing, which honestly wasn't
She has the same light bar as me, I can see.
super profitable for them. They had a nagging feeling that even though they were following best practices, it might not actually be best for their business in 2025.
So for your business, like they're investing 7 figures, as she said. So for maybe for your business, the old way of testing could be working for you, because it's another level. But let's see.
Here's what their creative testing methodology used to look like. They refer to it as sandbox testing.
So initially we were doing what I think most advertisers were doing. We were sandbox creative testing, where we had your typical creative testing campaign, we had concepts, and every single concept was a different ad set, and we were pushing and forcing.
Yes, exactly. So this is how most people do, and you can do this strategy depending on your business. I think it's okay. So we got a concept, as she said, you got a concept per ad set. Within this concept, you can create variations, and they will be your ads. 3 to 5 variations within a concept. Okay, so it's the concept, it's the messaging, and the variations are small arguments that you should change according to the ad. Okay.
Spend to every single ad so that we could really empower Kristen as the creative strategist, as well as our brand team, with all of the information and data on every single ad so that they could make informed decisions on how to move forward.
While this strategy is a great way to test a wide variety of ads to find winning ad creative, Seed was really questioning whether or not this was actually right for them at this budget. They felt that the meta ads algorithm actually did a pretty good job of determining whether or not an ad creative was going to be scalable or not. However, underneath sandbox testing, they were actually throttling spend pretty equally to creatives initially. They felt like they were perhaps pushing that spend towards creatives that the algorithm already knew weren't super scalable. So with the help of their meta disruptor.
So yeah, but what do I do? What do I do in this case? Instead of ABO, I use CBO. So let's say I it's a CBO that works like an ABO because I set up a minimum ad spend, so it works like ABO. But the rest of the budget, I leave to Facebook decide, because with the creative testing, I just set as a minimum ad spend the desired CPA, which is how much I'm willing to pay to test that ad, and then the rest I just leave to Meta spend, and then I remove that. And after that, obviously, I launch a new campaign to scale or to audience testing.
Partner, they actually brainstormed a brand new methodology using ASC to test their creatives, which ended up actually giving them
This is not applicable for us because we don't use shopping campaigns, because we're talking about for products and coaching business.
Better results while ironically testing less creatives.
It is about 15 to 20 ads, could be about 3 to 5, and we group them all together and we allow the algorithm to decide where does the spend go, and that's what we use as our number one lever of success on an ad. Does it actually scale, and most importantly, does it scale at efficiency? But even if it doesn't scale at efficiency, the fact that the algorithm really pushed that ad and put a lot of spend to it means something to us more than it did before when we were forcing spend.
Seed has their own internal creative team that focuses on graphics.
Okay, so they rely more on meta decisions. So what we usually do, and what you probably already seen before, is that sometimes you don't have conversions, but Meta keeps pushing the budget towards this specific creatives. And why does Meta do that? The reason for it's because this creative has a higher likelihood to be, according to Meta, to be more qualified than the other. Even if the other is converting, they're spending money on the ad that is not converting, because this ad is probably providing a good user experience, but obviously is not making them exit the platform and convert. So that's why they do that. But at this level they're spending, it doesn't matter so much. That's what I understood. Let's check.
Graphics, high production creatives, and whitelisted content with influencers. But they also have 3 creative agencies that they work with. 2 of them focus on UGC, and the third on graphic design, statics, and AI creative. They typically launch 4 to 5 creative tests or sprints per month, which are divided up by creative source and can have anywhere from 12 to 25 ad creatives inside any given sprint.
The other interesting thing about ASC testing for us is that before, when we were sandbox testing, we really had to feel like we were beholden to 4 to 5 variations of a concept. Now, if we have one concept that
You see, this is the variation, doesn't change so much.
maybe worked on another platform and we want to throw it into an ASC creative sprint, we don't need to have 5 variations. So I think it's allowed us to be a lot more flexible, actually, which is an interesting outcome of ASC creative testing.
So what Seed is essentially saying here is that sometimes they can actually test more variations of a certain concept if they have a lot of conviction that that's actually going to do better. Or they can actually test less variations and really just double down on the creative variable that they have the most confidence in. That is
Yeah, but that's understandable, right? Because you know what kind of messaging is working, so then you create more variations within that specific messaging.
instead of arbitrarily just coming up with variations for variation's sake. They can actually just test the creatives that they think actually have the most likelihood of being scalable. And something that's really interesting to note is I've actually worked on teams that were spending a similar amount to Seed, but they were actually testing 2 to 3 times more creative because of that variation testing methodology, even if they didn't have the highest confidence in some of those variations that they were testing.
What I have found, and I don't know if this is validated by Meta or not, but visual differentiation is the bigger unlock than like iterative copy.
Yeah, so this is interesting because when you're starting your business, those visual differences and even ad formats using the same concept, they tend to be more recommended to beginners. Because once you start to get to a certain level, slight variations may create a bigger difference because you have a bigger budget to spend on each ad, so you can test slight variations properly, because when you're starting, you have so much budget to spend, so the ads shouldn't be so equal, But on the other hand, she's saying the opposite here, which is really interesting.
Testing, where I have found that launching like slight tweaks on copy is not a big enough lever to actually get a different result there. The way I think,
yeah, that's what I recommend. Just slight difference is not enough. Like, test both differences. Yeah, that's what I would say.
About it is like, if you're looking at something and in 2 seconds you can't tell that it's different, the personified algorithm may not know it's different either.
Now, this is a really interesting point, because to what I said earlier, a lot of times in sandbox creative testing, you are going to be doing variant testing, which is often just testing different messaging points or different hooks, which makes me wonder actually if this bigger swing ASC style of testing is actually going to be more commonplace the further we get into 2025. Actually, let me know in the comments how you guys are currently conducting your creative testing, and if you are interested in giving ASC testing a try.
It is a careful balance between like variations for variation's sake and the quality of how differentiated your creative is.
As an example, Kristen shared their biggest creative learning to date and how they've been able to diversify and extend the life of that creative concept. So what is that top performing creative?
It's the aspirational pooping every day. Will I poop when I'm traveling? Will I go before the big game on this big day? And I mean,
yeah, this is how we should find your messaging, a bold statement that makes people wondering what you're talking about. Sometimes this is a good approach, okay? As she said.
It's our top value proposition on Meta.
They've been able to explore this concept and add true creative diversity to this learning by leaning into the specialties of their internal and external teams.
The ones with the static pooping every day are coming from our internal creative team, where we have a really great tight feedback loop on briefing, copy review, brainstorming within our growth ads pod.
These learnings are then passed down to their creative agencies, where they then explore this concept within their own unique specialty.
And then the UGC assets are actually from 2 of the creative agencies we're working with. And that has been really interesting to take learnings that have performed well for us from an internal creative workstream standpoint and brief those into an outside agency and someone who doesn't live and breathe seed all the time, to think about how they would actually bring that concept to life visually and in terms of a storyline and a script. So it's been really interesting to take a learning that we have pretty high conviction in and explore that through different creative sources and see how different creative sources with different creative teams and different expertise will bring that to life in a way that provides us success and diversity within the account.
Now, what this says to me is you don't always need your agencies to come up with net new concepts, and you don't always need to pursue volume for volume's sake. In this case, Seed basically know what's working, and they want to be able to lean into their external partners to then test it out in their own specialty formats. This is another way that Seed's ASC creative testing methodology really allows them to stay laser focused.
We could put 50 ads in an ASC, but we know that only 3 to 5 of them are going to get prioritized. So when we work with these agencies, we actually keep a pretty tight cap on the amount of variations we get, because we want to make sure we're getting learnings on the things that we feel the most conviction in, and we're not like going super wide and putting a ton of resources behind something that is unproven.
By and large, the thing that works the best for Seed, unsurprisingly or not, is their whitelisting content. And depending on their performance at any given time, they know that they can lean into their whitelisted influencer content if they need a performance boost. However, on the flip side, if they have really excellent results, they know that they can test out more of those bigger swings or unproven concepts. However, a really important nuance that they shared was actually a learning that they had based on an incrementality test with Meta.
For us, what is most efficient for an internal attribution is our whitelisted ads. And so with that, obviously as a media buyer focused on efficiency, you're going to start shuffling a lot of your money towards those. But you start to question a little bit of, what do these other sources bring to the table that we're not currently seeing in our internal attribution? And so we actually did an internal study looking at the incrementality of our whitelisted influencer ads versus our internally made creative. And what we found is they actually have very similar incrementality, just the last touch attribution is completely different. And really where those conversions are coming in from our internally made creative is from view through, which means for us on our internal attribution, people are still purchasing. They're just purchasing maybe not last touch on Meta. I could push all of my budget to whitelisting ads. That's our most efficient, but would there be overall higher CACs across other channels? And so that's where the question starts to come in of like, how do we keep diversifying sources and keep bringing different people into our funnel, even if it's sometimes like not the perfect thing for internal attribution on that individual channel, and what's better for the greater good of the business.
This was honestly a huge light bulb moment for me. As media buyers, we are trained to optimize ad accounts by cutting out what isn't performing as well and doubling and tripling down on where we see performance. But Tiffany is essentially saying that this can be short-sighted. So in this case, whitelisted influencer content can often lead more to immediate purchases, while some of their other content might be really great for generating that top of funnel touch point and then eventually lead to a purchase. But maybe not within the same time frame as that whitelisting content.
So there are two explanations for that. So the first one is the level of consciousness. So maybe one of them more like problem aware and the other solution aware. You can tackle this differently by scoring the leads and creating specific campaigns to them, but this is more advanced. But you can create even different types of retargeting ad to these people. But the other reason is that they saw one ad and maybe the other ad acted as a complementary ad to make them realize the purchase. So, and that's why when I test the creatives, I not quite turn off the bad ones, but actually what I do, I have a retargeting campaign with all the ads, regardless of the fact whether they perform good or not, because it's kind of what I said here about tackling them with different angles, because once you tested your creatives, you're going to have a narrow number of ads. But now with the retargeting campaign, I'm going to show all the ads, even the ones that didn't perform well. Maybe they're not good at a first glance when you first see the ad, but maybe it's good to see the ad a second time, and this ad pushes them to purchase because it's a complementary ad. Because the first one is better, but to convert most of people, but maybe this other one that didn't perform so well, it's good to be seen as a second time ad. So that's why I like to create a retargeting campaign with all the ads, obviously with a smaller budget, so we're not compromising too much the ad spend, and especially it depends off your audience size, the budget here, but it usually is a lower budget.
And when their team isn't in a performance crisis, they actually continue.
I don't know, maybe because they're e-commerce, they're selling physical products different, but for consultants and course creators, that's how I do it, and that's how it works for me.
To spend on these diversified assets, even if the results don't look as great inside meta reporting. And that's because they know through these lift tests that the ROI will be there through their business down the line.
And I think one of the really interesting things that came out of the incrementality study is the most efficient incremental CPA was the holdout cell, where we were running a blend of creative from our internal team, the whitelisted program, and the agencies we're working with. And I think that is sometimes hard unless you're looking at like the overall health of the channel over time to see the impact of running diversified creative. And to me, that was a huge wake-up call that yes, we are being held to these like very strict last touch CPA goals, and Tiffany has done so much amazing work at reducing the last touch CPA for Meta, but there are sometimes actions happening within a marketing channel that are hard to derive so in such a narrow way. And that to me was just a big flag that like we are doing what we need to do for the overall health of our account, which is continuing to run diversified creative, even though not everything has the same last touch CAC.
Now, this is really fascinating to me because essentially what Kristen is saying is that the most effective campaign was not the whitelisting campaign that had the best tracked results. It was actually the campaign that had the diversified assets underneath that single campaign. Now, this makes me wonder if the next era of testing meta ads creative is actually going to be more like developing a creative ecosystem, almost like a 360 marketing campaign where there are going to be multiple formats, multiple talent options, multiple levels of awareness, and just multiple ways to actually reach your target customer. I like to think of it more as like a curation from the outside look.
Yeah, it's like as I told you before, like it will help to tackle with different angles. So that's why it's a good way to spend your budget, but only if you have a large amount. That's why I use only for retargeting. I think it's better if you have a smaller amount of budget.
Looking in on this process, it is really clear to me that Kristen and Tiffany are a true force, and a lot of their success actually boils down to their personal relationship and how much trust they have in one another, and also how their team is structured.
The change that we made was really afforded by the fact that my function sits within growth, and we share these goals of growing the business sustainably and efficiently. And I don't think it would have worked if you were trying to make this case with someone who was planning your creative and was on a completely separate team. So I think that's a little bit of the unique organizational structure here, and the fact that like Tiffany and I are working together on a daily basis, and while we need to think about how we position learnings and how we change that narrative to the creative team as a result of this, I said to Tiffany, if this helps us reduce our CAC and we can actually test more because we've reduced our CAC, that is a win for the business.
And for me, this is what the future of media buying and creative strategy actually look like. It's all about growing businesses and building teams that make that a lot more effective.
Final question is, if you could give one piece of advice to a brand just starting out, what would you say?
Track what you're testing, track what you're learning. I think like creative testing on Meta has the ability to be the way an entire brand learns. And that's really what we have found, is that like that's where we're doing the bulk of our creative testing, and having documents that I can shoot off to the organic social team with our top performing ads. Like everyone wants to know what's working well on Meta.
And then I think for me, it's like when looking at data and performance, look at the entire picture, not just a single metric. Like really take into consideration every piece of the funnel and every little, the click-through rate, the CPMs, really every piece of it. As you kind of devise creative performance and everything, you can really get a full funnel picture there and be able to make better hypotheses and stuff for the future of how to iterate.
And that concludes our first episode of Ad Spend. I cannot wait to hear what you guys think. Since having this conversation with Seed, I have been thinking nonstop about what this next era of creative testing is going to look like on Meta ads. Are we really going to be rolling out sandbox testing? Are we going to be developing creative ecosystems inside of...
Okay, thanks for that video, Dara. Let me know what you think about it here in the comments. And again, maybe this is something that only works for big brands, big companies that invest more than 7 figures, but test yourself and check it out. But yeah, see if my intakes also will help you. And don't forget to hit the like button. I cast a spell on you. Bound. The spell says those who do not subscribe to this channel will never reach your turn ad spend over 2. You got no option, my friend.
Subscribe, don't wait, hit that button for real. Transform your hustle, make the most of the deal. From the screen to the sky, media buyer for coaches, take your biz on a high. Course creators gather, ain't no time to lag. Ads sharpened up like a knife in a drag. Content so slick, make your wallet go swoon. Meta algorithms got you rich by noon.